Hi everyone! So today we're going to talk about a few of the new wish features we added in Orx over the last year or two. So it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's nice details that are good to know. And we're going to touch on things like audio buses, audio filters, um, the new way to position objects relatively, these kind of things. Also, it's been requested to cover real quick the mod and movie extensions. So we're going to start by creating a new project with those extensions. So if we look at the init, we see that we have the mod and the movie one. So let's call it features test. And we're going to add the mod extension and the movie extension. Good. Features test. Build. Windows. Visual 2022. And we have a feature test solution that we can open. We're going to build it. And let me open the config. Hopefully the zoom is big enough here. We're going to do our usual change for streaming, which want a screen width of 1920 and a screen height of 1080. We also want it on the second monitor. And we also want to scale the console. So let's see if I start it. Oh, let's do this. Okay, we have it, and the console is big. So as we can see that there's a video playing at the beginning, and here you should be able to hear the music coming from a mod. Today we're going to use assets that are mostly made by Sausage and our own Nico from FullyBugged. The only exception being the module, which is Stardust, and I'm going to add the credit as usual in the description of the video. So let's set what we have right now. The movie is very simple. If we look at the source and we look for movie, we can see that we have to define the orxMovie implementation, and then we just include the orxMovie.h, and there will be orxMovie init that we call in the init function, and orxMovie exit that we call in the exit function, and that's about it for the integration. What we do now is that we have same thing. We're going to look for movie. We have a new type of resource that is called movie, and in this case we put it in data movie. So let's go back here. Of course it doesn't go where I wanted. Workspace, data, movie. So here we have our little MPEG movie. Right now this extension is more like a proof of concept, but it could be functional for things like a splash screen like we're doing right now when creating a new project. This is because it's using quite an old encoding format, which is MPEG-1 for the movie, with MPEG-1 layer 2 for the audio. So you're not going to get the highest compression ratio for this, like the tiny short movie you get at the beginning, the splash screen. Sorry, I'm struggling for words today. Is already like 3.36 megabytes, and it's not like in super high resolution either. But it does a job. It works. So either you can write your own extension supporting like newer formats, or you can just simply use this one. For this one, we're actually using an open source library called PLMPeg, and that's why you're going to see it in the include. See, PLMPeg, it's a single file library, which I kind of enjoy for integration. And you see it's an MPEG-1 video decoder, MPEG-2 audio decoder. So MP2, actually it's not MPEG-2, it's MPEG-1 layer 2, MP2. And the way we use it is just by, so going back here, is by just declaring property in our object that is called movie. and we just give it the resource, which is our logo.mpeg here. And that's it. That's all there is to it. There is one thing that comes that is not obvious with this extension. If we open the console and we look for, actually, I don't remember the command name, so we can look at it's object.configuration. Okay. So there's a new command that has been added. It's called object get movie duration, and you can see that you just pass it an object. So right now it's too late because we don't have an object anymore. Here the logo is our object. When we call get movie duration, it just gets in second the duration of the movie that is on this object, and if there's none, it sends back 0. Our logo is displaying our movie, and when the movie has been finished, completed, we are just going to call on delete. We are just going to call an object.create, and we're creating our scene, and the scene has a music. So that's how we do a very simple splash screen. We can see in the code, instead of the traditional create scene, we create a logo this time, and that's it. That's all the code does. It creates a viewport, it creates a logo, and then logo will create the scene when the logo is on display. The good thing with onDelete is that you could actually even delete it further, like if you want to react to, I don't know, like a key press or something like this, and bypass the splash screen. All you have to do is destroy your logo, and because it's on the sequencing is based on the onDelete, the scene will be created no matter what, so you don't have to worry about it. Just as soon as the logo is deleted, no matter how it is deleted, we're going to go on to the scene. We can see we have two FXs on this, logo in and logo out, and I'm actually coming back to this because we're going to showcase a newer feature of the FX, which is the Stagger property, and as you can see, we're using it on the logo, so we're going to come back to this a bit later. This object is just rendered as a plain object, which means that if I were to create, like scale it down at 0.5, the entire object would be scaled down, and it should cover it like, of course, because it has a parent camera. That's not what I wanted to do. So let's create a new object. So create new logo, and we're going to do the same thing, movie.mpeg, and if I create a new logo, so once this one is done, object create new logo. You can see that right now it's like taking the entire space, but if we were to set new logo scale 0.2, for example, and we're creating it, and you can see it's 5 times smaller. So it's really an object like any other object. There's nothing special about it. Like set new logo, angular, velocity 90. It's just a movie rendered inside a texture. That texture can be used in a shader, it can be used on an object, anywhere. I'm going to lower the volume of the music, because otherwise it's going to be annoying real quick. So music is there. Oh, the volume is already quite low. Let's put it even lower. So that's it for the movie extension. The last thing that was requested is how do we get MPEG-1 movie. And for this, all we have to do is basically use FFmpeg for conversion. There's probably other way to convert it, but I'm just going from the documentation of PLMpeg. And we can see that encoding for PLMpeg, they do recommend using FFmpeg. So we're just going to do this ourselves. I don't have any other video I can use free of right, so we're just going to use the same video as before, but we're going to encode it manually. So right now I'm going to remove our logo MPEG, and we are going to go. I thought I had it. No, okay. So we're going to copy data movie. The MP4 that was used to create this one, we're going to copy it here. And if we go here, we can see that we do have our orxvideo head movie. And That's exactly the same movie. What we're going to do is we're going to call the FFmpeg to convert it. So FFmpeg, the input is orx video head. We want it in MPEG-1. We don't change any quality settings or anything. The audio is MP2, and we can actually call it output.mpeg. There, the encoding has been done. So now if we're looking at it, we have the output.mpeg. We can copy this in data, movie, and just make sure that we get the one. Logo doesn't exist anymore, but I mean, logo doesn't exist anymore, but we'll just output, and it should still be working. There we go. And we encoded our movie into MPEG, and there's nothing more than that. We can see that this one is actually twice the size of the old one. I guess the one I encoded last time, I did use like a more aggressive encoder, or like probably resized to a smaller dimension, just so that it takes less space in the orx repository. But that's it. That's everything for the movie. So unless there's any question about the movie, we're going to move on to the mod extension. I take that as good to go. We're going to remove. Oh no, wait. Actually, we're going to talk about the Stagger first FX. I mentioned that. So Stagger is a way to be able to chain FXs more easily. These properties actually can be set either on the FX or on the FX slot. On the FX slot, it's very simple. It's yes or no. Yes means that the slot will be added after the previous slot. So that it's very easy to chain slot inside the same FX, and you don't have to worry about like the timing of it and things like this. You just start at 0, and then you can just stagger them. On the FX, you can see that there are actually more options. There's a Boolean, which is yes or no, true or false. But there's also a floating value, and this is an optional signed offset to when we want it to start. So basically, this is tell us if we want to be starting at the same time as the timestamp inside the FX itself, or if we want to start at the end of any other FXs that already are running on this object. And this is an optional signed integer, and we can actually put it negative if we want to overlap with the previous FX, and that's kind of what we're doing here. So here we don't stagger. We only have one FX. We don't stagger with the logo in. We just say we want to start at 0. But what we do here for the float, we execute a lazy command, and that lazy command is going to find the object logo. It's going to call the get movie duration, and it's going to just return 0.8 seconds before the end of the movie duration. So we don't have to worry about knowing how long the movie is. We can do it at runtime, and it's just going to start fading out 0.8 seconds before the movie ends, and that's what we see. There was a quick fade in, and then there's going to be a fade out 0.8 seconds before the movie ends, and then the movie is over, and we transition to the music. Let's stagger things directly. We see that we have a logo in, which is just a fade in with an alpha, curve smooth. It's going to last 0.5 seconds, and it's going from like completely transparent to completely opaque. And here we're going to change this. We're just going to say stagger, yes, true. And we say we're going to start 1 second after it's been, oh, actually, let's start with just true. So if we do this, it's going to fade in and fade out right after the fade in. So we are not going to see much of it. So fade in, fade out. That's basically the base stagger. Now we say we want to fade in, watch the movie for 2 seconds, and then fade out. And that's what we do here. So we fade in, 2 seconds of displayed, and then fade out. And that's the Stagger FX. And we can use like a negative number if we want an overlap. If like, let's say, maybe we're going to fade in for a bit longer this time, so that we can actually see it. We're going to fade in for 2 seconds, but we're going to overlap on the last second. So we are never going to be full opaque. We're going to fade in for 2 seconds, but starting at the the second of the fade in, we're going to start fading out already. So fade in starts for a second, and we're going to start fading out already. We didn't go full, and that's it. So that's just the Stagger FX, and that's pretty straightforward, but it's nice to know that it exists, because you don't have to create like a very, like for example, you have like a lot of different timing for fade in and fade out. You can just create one standard fade out, and because it's going to be staggered, it can be placed anywhere after like a regular fade in for things that appear only for a certain amount of time. Or any other use of this, you can get the generic timing, and just because you're using stagger, you can easily place it after any other effects. So that can become quite handy sometimes. Any question on Stagger movie? If not, moving on. So right now we are going to go directly to the scene, and remember in code we were creating the logo, so I'm going to remove this, and we're just going to the scene directly now. Okay. Our scene has multiple objects. It creates children, object, sound, and music. The sound is a little audio operation. The object is a spinning logo, and the music is what is using the mod extension at the moment. And you can see that here it's a simple object, except that this object now has a property called mod instead of sound. And for the mod, we're using Stardust memories from Just Sanity. So if people are not familiar with what a mod is, it's a very old audio format that comes from the Amiga, if I'm not mistaken. And it's like similar to MIDI, but with samples. So it's a way to store like quite nice, mostly electronic, but other stuff can be done as well, tracks in a very tiny space. Like this mod, and this mod is lasts for quite a long. I think it loops and it lasts like 3 minutes or something like this, 2 minutes, I don't remember. And this one here, if we're going to look at how much space it takes, so if we go into the music here, we can see that the Stardust is 150 kilobytes. And this one is actually one of the biggest mods I have on my machine. Most mods are like a few dozen kilobytes. So if you're going for like an old school vibe and you want to use already existing mods, or if your musician likes using trackers, and mod is now supported natively by Orx with this extension. And you can see that the extension is also going to be extremely simple to integrate. It's just including orxMod.h, defining the orxMod implementation before. And in the init, we call orxMod init. In the exit, we call orxMod exit. And that's about it. And it adds the property mod to an object. And that's all we have for playing music. That's it for mod. And it also relies on a single file library called PocketMod. And yeah, it's a 870 line library, including all the comments. So it's really tiny and it's quite nice. And again, it can be used as a proof of concept to add extensions for any kind of audio format you'd like. And as usual, we're going to see it's just going to play an audio like any other audio on Orx. So Orx by default supports the sound and the music properties on the sound structure. So it can stream music or it can preload music in memory, and it can do it from different audio format. It can load WAV, OGG, MP3, and now mod as well. But it's the same kind of result. So you're going to receive the same events if you want to process the audio. You can use buses, as we're going to see. You can use FXs. You can change the volume, the pitch. It's really like same kind of pipeline. So it's the exact same pipeline used by regular audio supporting Orx. So that's what's nice. Like for example, if we're looking for our music object and we want to change the pitch of it, you're going to see that it's going to work with any kind of audio. So now like it's going half as fast as before with like the pitch, but we can actually go like faster. And yeah, so it's just a plain audio. And we can change the volume, we can change the pitch, we can use spatial audio with it as well, like it will be specialized with the listener, and really like any other audio. So now we can actually look into groups, buses and filters. So let's see what buses are. Buses are a way to group audios inside Orx, and it's a tree hierarchy. So we have, by default, we have a bus called master. That's the main audio bus. And we can add as many buses we want on the fly, and those can be set in a tree hierarchy the way we want. And the property we apply on one bus are going to be applied to all the objects inside this bus and all the buses under this bus. And we can change the volume, we can change the pitch, or we can even apply filters on a bus, as we're going to see later. So right now, because we don't specify any bus for sound and music, they're in their own bus. So we're going to override this. We're going to say that sound is going to use a bus called SFX. And those names, you can select the one you want. The only one that Orx recognizes is the master one, and it's a root bus no matter what. You cannot change this. However, you can attach bus under it. And for the music, we're going to say, we're going to call it music. Yeah, very original, I know. So now we have two different buses, and we can modify those buses. Like if we start, you can hear the popping sound at the beginning, and the music is playing. But we have commands, or we can do it in code. We can alter the buses. So, like for example, we can actually verify that there are buses under master. You can see there's music and sound get bus sibling for music, we should have SFX. So we see under master we have both music and SFX. So everything I'm going to change on master is going to affect music and SFX. So if I say sound set bus volume master 0, it's going to mute everything. It's going to be a bit annoying, but I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to ask for the sound to loop so we can have an SFX playing. So sorry ahead of time, it's going to be a bit annoying, but I'm going to mute it right away. Okay. So by setting the bus volume master to 0, it mutes all the buses under it. So that's like your global mute or your global volume slider. And now you can have separate slider for your SFX, for your music, for any kind of things you want to add. Like, I don't know, you want to have a separate bus for ambient, separate bus for voice. You can add as many buses as you want. So we're going to say, we're going to set the volume of the SFX1 is 0.1, and we're going to put back master to 1. And we can see that, yeah, it's a super, let's put it a bit. You can see that the audio is still playing for SFX, but it's very low. And we can change like set bus pitch, for example, SFX2. Now it's playing much faster. And because it's a hierarchy, anything that we apply on master is going to be applied on SFX as well. So if we were to change the pitch of master to 0.5, the SFX will play normally again, but the music is twice as slow. And this is because we have the SFX bus using 2 as the pitch factor, and the master 0.5, so they counteract, and the audio is playing correctly. I'm at 1. Whereas the music only gets 0.5 from the master and 1 from the music 1, and it's playing slower. So I'm going to mute set volume SFX 0, so no more audio for the SFX. So you can see how these can be like different sliders for audio. Of course, we can change the volume of the audio on a per audio basis, but you would have to iterate over all the existing audio and making sure that all new audios are using specific volume and things like this, and it's not something that's very handy. That's why we have the concept of buses. And we could like change, as you can see, like set bus. We can change the parenting of the buses. So if I wanted to have multiple kind of sound effects, I could create like a SFX bus, and under the SFX bus I can create, I don't know, ambient and player or whatever, and have this hierarchy. So any modification applied on the SFX would be transmitted to both children, but anything that is only for ambient or only for player would only affect what's under them. So that's for buses. Any question regarding them? I'm going to stop the audio. There we go. And I'm also going to remove this so that we don't have that annoying sound every time. If there's no questions, we are going to move on to filters. And that's where it gets a bit more fun. So people that know a bit more about audio than me would do more creative stuff, but I'm going to demonstrate like very simple things. If we go here and we're looking for filter, we can see that now on the sound we can apply a list of filters, and it's the same as when you declare lists in orx, they are going to be treated in order. Sorry again for my English today. So the list of filters are going, but it's actually written here. The list, the filters are going to be applied and chained in their order of declaration. So if we have multiple filters on one sound, they are going to be chained in the order they've been declared. But we can add and remove filters on the fly, and we can add and remove filters not only on sounds, but we can also do it on buses. So if people are a bit knowledgeable about audio, you can actually define your own bike-wide filters, and that's the base for defining most of actually all filters you will see under this. If you know what you're doing, you can definitely use this, but most people are probably going to use pre-existing filters and just tweak them. So we have filters that allow you to let pass the lower frequencies of the sound, high one, the high pass, band pass. We can have low shelf and high shelf, so instead of completely muting under frequency, it's going to change the gain under frequency, or the high shelf one is going to change the gain above a given frequency. The notch filter is only is going to remove only a very narrow frequency, and the peak filter is only getting to let pass a very narrow frequency as well. And the last filter we have as a template is a delay filter, which is basically a delay, and you can make an echo with it. So let's create two filters. So we're just going to copy this as a template. We're going to call this one echo. So it's type delay. We use custom parameters if we want to change the parameters of that filter at runtime. If you set use custom parameter to true, you're going to receive events giving you all the parameters, and you can tweak every frame the parameters of your echo. Like for example, if you want more reverb, less reverb, based on I don't know, the size of the cave you're in or something like this. So right now we're going to say that we want about half a second of delay, and with a decay, delay, and we're going to put it like 2 seconds of delay. It's much, I don't know. I am really not very knowledgeable, so I'm taking numbers. And the decay 0.5, and we can see what we are getting there for echo. And we're going to call one underwater, and for this one we're just going to allow low frequency to pass, and we're going to block everything else. So it's a low pass filter. So the type is low pass. For my OCDs, I'm just going to align this. We don't want custom palms, and the frequency we're going to say everything and anything under 400 Hz, and the others will keep the default value. We don't need to change this. So now we have two filters that have been defined, and you can see that they are very easy to define, and we can apply them either with the filter list on the sound directly, or we can just do it at runtime. That's what we're going to do. So right now we have the music. You can, I'm going to put it slightly louder, because now we want to focus on it. So going back to 0.5, it was the beginning. We're going to find it. We found the music. Now we're going to add a filter on it. And we're going to add the echo one. Probably not the best parameters, but you can actually hear the echo. It's not the best result. I'm going to remove the echo. That's better. Let's give it a bit more time, maybe it will be better with like 2 seconds of delay instead. Okay, now it's more it's not the most pleasing one, so let's remove it. Okay, let's try the underwater one. And now you can actually see that only the low frequencies are passed. And again, we can just remove the filter. So this allows you to change properties of your audio at runtime and add any kind of effects you want. And you can add multiple ones. They're going to be chained. And you can also add them on buses to affect multiple things at the same time. So like, for example, let's say that we want, we're going to apply it on the music bus. So sound, set, bus, oops, not set, add bus filter. On the music one, I want to put the underwater. And you can actually hear that the music is underwater. But if I were to play now the sound one, which is the appearing, it's completely unaffected. You can hear clearly it's not underwater because we only apply the underwater filter on the music bus and not on any other buses. We could do the same, so I'm going to object, no, sound, remove all bus filter from music, so it's back to normal. We could apply the underwater to like the master, and it would affect everyone, for example, both SFX and music and anything under master. So if I do this and now I create the logo, you can see that the logo also plays underwater. So you can really change your soundscape the way you want combining filters with buses. And you don't have to worry about knowing which sounds are running at the moment and which sounds are going to be created. You just use buses for this kind of things, and that is very it's very easy to create buses on the fly. As you can see, they are just like names, and you can add them on the fly. You can remove buses on the fly if you wanted, and any sound playing under a bus, if the bus is removed, it's going to be on the parenting bus. So it's if you need to create like a specific bus just locally for a specific event in time, you can do it on the fly. You can apply effects on it and move objects, move sounds into that bus or out of that bus. It's very easy to do that in runtime. And I think that's all I have for audio filters and audio buses. Is there any question on those? I take that.
So I was gonna type it, but I'll say it. Can we move a sound that's currently playing into a different bus? So say you had an underwater bus and you had like a an echo bus. While the sound is still playing, can it be shifted and it'll continue to play from where it's up to?
Yes. So is there a command for that? I do not know, but you can do it in code. So let's see sound. Yeah, you cannot change it with a command. You can only modify bonus. Oh, maybe wait. Yeah, no, you cannot do it with a command. However, I'm pretty sure you can do it in code. Let's just verify this. If I'm wrong, it's easy to add. So we are going to need go to orx. Go to orx. Perfect. And from here, I want to go into. There might not be a wrapper here in object. Yeah, but it should be done on the sound itself. So get bus ID. So you can retrieve the bus and you can change the bus or the sound. So yes, it can be done in code, but there is no wrapping command for now. If we think it's a useful command, I can definitely add it. It's not a lot of work. But yes, you can move sound on the fly between buses. You can move buses, you can add buses, remove them, and move sounds.
Yeah, as long as it's in code, like that's super handy.
Yeah. So the feature is here. It's just not exposed through commands, but in code you can do it. Any other questions? Or every time you see, I'm pretty sure that most of you already know, every time you see an ID, a string ID, there's a function that allows you to pass a string and get the ID. It's basically a hash, and the org string hash, you pass the string, it will give you the ID you can use everywhere a string ID is taken. It's just an optimization so that we don't have to pass strings all the time. You get the hash once, it's a 64-bit integer value, and you can use it anywhere. Most string interface, most string APIs now that are only using names for a purpose of labeling something are using string IDs. But when we want to display something, it's a full string. So just so don't be scared if you see string ID and not a string. You just call the hash function a string and you get a string ID. Next on our list, unless there's more question, next on our list is localization group. And for this, I'm going to use Nico's and Sausage's work with their permission. I'm going to copy this right now. So data and sounds, I want to, oh, I knew I had it open. It was on the wrong monitor. I want to copy some assets they made. I want to copy all this. It was something they made for a quick demonstration for localization, and I'm just going to take part of the demonstration to show that we can actually have group and what groups are. So data, I believe there's also textures, and those are the textures I'm going to use. There we go. We should not need this anymore. Let's go back here, close a bit all this. We don't need all this, we only need our config. And we're going to clean up a bit, just actually, let's remove everything. We are going to create a little dude. I'm going to separate this graphic section just for clarity. It's usually handy to use the self as a section, but here I'm just going to use the graphic. We're going to say that, as usual, the pivot, I want it centered, and it's going to use texture, and that texture is, let's create a typical OC. And I think that's all I want for this little dude. There, it's a bit tiny. Let's give him a scale. So that should do the trick. Yeah, and we're going to remove the smoothing. We can actually just remove it here, so that our object won't be smooth. Okay, so we have a little dude. Is an Australian character, and that's fine. But let's say that based on the language you select, we want a different character. So first we need to introduce the concept of languages, and this is done through the local section. This can be found not in the creation because we are not creating an object here. We are just going to go into the settings and look for local, and you can see there's only one single property, which is a list of languages we can use inside our game. We're just going to simple, we're going to language list, we're just going to have English and French, and because I'm lazy, I'm only going to use the abbreviation. So those are two languages. This means that we can define properties, strings, for both languages. So we are creating a section with the same name, with the same capitalization. So because I use lowercase, I need to use lowercase as well. And we're just going to say, fine. Oh, actually first. We have our typical OC, and I believe it's typical Frenchman if you wanted it to be like a French dude. Yeah. And say we want it to be different when we're English and French. We're just going to add a property here, and we're going to say, okay, my dude texture is going to be typical OC in English, and it's going to be typical Frenchman in French. And here, instead of just hard coding, we're just going to use the $sign, which tells the graphic to use the local system to retrieve the content. And the name of our key is dude texture. So if we do this, we get an OC by default because the default language is the first one in the list, which is English. And actually, we can see this by get current language. It's English. Now, if we were to select a different language, if we were to select French, you can see up on the fly, we now have our little French dude. And Orx does this swap for you. You don't have to do anything, as you can see. All I have to do is define a property inside the local. And this is how localization has been working in Orx almost since the beginning. So that's very handy. And we can localize graphics, so texture. We can localize text, and we can localize sound. So let's add a few properties to this little guy here first. We're going to say that this little dude is going to have like child this. We're going to give it a name. And our name, graphic, I'm just going to use at this time. Our name is going to have like a scale of 2. It's going to not choose a texture but a text, which is also going to be ourselves. And the content of the text is, I don't know how we can call it, Jackman for our little guy. And if I do this, if I did it correctly, oh yeah, because it inherits the 8th scale, we don't want to inherit the scale from the parent. So ignore from parent, we're going to say I don't want to have the scale inherited. Perfect. And now we're going to position it. So we're going to say I want the pivot to be at the top center. I can write top center, but top is enough. It's the same thing. And we want its position to be, I don't know, 0 in X, and let's try 20. That's a bit too much. See, because I don't know the size of my sprite, I need to like fiddle with this, and that's going to be a tie-in for the next feature we're going to see after that. So now it has a name, but if we were to select the language and go to French, the name doesn't change, and we want him to have like a different name in French. So we're going to use a key here, and we're going to say that's our dude name, and in English it's going to be Jackman. And in French, it's going with a lot of stereotypes here. It's going to be Marceau. There we go. So here, instead of taking the string directly hard coding it, we're just going to take it from the local system, and the key is dude name. So hopefully I didn't mess up, and now it's being Marceau. So every time I switch language, oops, you can see, yeah, I messed up because there was no PNG. That made a typo. There we go. When we go French and back to English, and everything is working fine. This is handy for text, and we can do the same thing for the audio. So hopefully that won't be too annoying. But let's say that our little dude also has greetings, and the greetings, it's going to use a sound list. It's going to use a single sound. We're going to use ourselves, and we're going to say that the sound is, and I don't remember. Oh, come on, there you Same thing. I'm not going to demonstrate. I'm going to jump straight to the next one. We're going to say that the dude, greetings, is going to be Kide, and in French is going to be bonjour. And because, and sorry about that, it's going to be a bit annoying. I apologize. So here we're going to change good greetings. We are going to make it loop. But I will have mercy on you, and I'm going to make it not allowed. Okay. So now if we go in French, you can see that the audio is also localized and on the fly. So that's very handy if you have a game and you want to switch language. Everything works fine. And so far, we've seen nothing new. But what if you want to play a game, you want the original voices, but you do want the text to be translated in your own language? Like, for example, you play a Japanese game, you want the Japanese audio, but you do want the French text. Right now, we cannot do that here, right? We select a language and everything switches at the same time. That's why groups were added recently, and groups allow you to change languages independently for each group. By default, so Orx has 3 different properties that's going to use localization, and those properties, as you can see, were the texture, the text, and the sound. So the groups are named the same way: texture, text, and sound. And we can use those groups and modify their language separately. Let's do this. Here you can see that we have the audio in English, but if we were to change the visual, the text, the name, so select language, we want to go for French, but only for the text. And you can see that the name has changed. And we can do the same thing for texture. Only the visual has changed, but the audio remains on English. And of course, if I do the same thing for sound, it switch, and we can go back to English for like the visuals and so on and so forth. You get the idea. So you can actually select languages based on groups now. 3 groups are already known by Orx, which are sorry, going to be a bit annoying. The text, the texture, and the audio groups. But if you want to create your own group, you can. It's just that you will have to listen to the select language event to do whatever you want with this group. Like, for example, you can have a group from, let's say you make a word game and you have a separate group for the dictionary or something like this. You can change the dictionary separately by giving it like a group that you name dictionary. The name again can be created on the fly. The group, like the buses we saw earlier, you can use like a name you create on the fly, and you can select language independently for different groups like this. So you could have like your UI in English and I don't know, your dictionary in Hungarian by just switching your local. And when you create something, let's say that we're using dictionary and we want so hi in English would be hi, but hi in French would be more salut. And when I select, if we look at the clock, local, sorry, first, we're going to, I'm doing it in config, so you can see that the commands can be executed like on create. Here for the dude, we're going to execute sound set bus volume. First of all, where is it? Greetings. You're going to go to the bus SFX. Oh, create a new bus, voice, and set voice to 0. So it's still playing, but it's quiet while we do this. And just to verify it's working, set bus volume, voice. Yeah. Bye. So now if we were to local and get string, so you can modify, by the way, the content of the local with set string, and you can query it with get string. And you can see that you can also pass a group, and the group is optional. If you don't pass a group, it's going to use the main one, so the current default one. Right now it's set to English. So if I do local get string for hi, it says that's the English version. But if I wanted to, for a group that we call dictionary, you say that it's in English right now. But if I were to say local select language French for just the dictionary, and if I retrieve now hi without giving a group, it's still going to be English because that's the default language we haven't changed. But for the dictionary specifically, we said it's going to be French. So if we get string in the dictionary group, right now the dictionary group is pointing to the French language, and we get salut. So again, this group did not exist. It's been created on the fly because I queried it, and that's how you can use different language like dictionaries for your word game, while you have like a different audio and different text for UI and so on and so forth. That's group for localization. Any question on this? I think we're good. So remember, I struggled a bit when positioning the name under the parent here. I had to know and like fiddle with the size, and for example, if I'm using a different sprite with a different size, it's going to be messed up and things like this. It's not going to work. So one way to do this is, and also I put the pivot on top. So if I change the pivot to center, you'll see that it's not positioned correctly anymore. It's too high. But if I were to go back to my top pivot, if I were to apply any transformations are always applied on the pivot of the object. So if I were to find my name and angular velocity at 90, you can see that it's rotating above its pivot, around its pivot, and the pivot is on the top of the name. And maybe it's not something I want. Maybe it's I wanted my pivot to be like in the center because I want it to rotate on its own in the middle of it. But then I will have to make sure that my placement is on my pivot and so on and so forth. So now Orx has different ways of doing this. So let's go back to the pivot top. Instead of the position, say I want to be at the bottom of my parents. Well, it's easy. Just say bottom. And now my object is the bottom of my parents. That's simple. We added literal to the position for objects. And I can say like I want to be at the bottom right. Okay, fair enough. Now my top pivot is aligned to the bottom right of my character. But let's say that now I want it to be corner to top corner, so it would be like the top left for the pivot, is that my position is at the bottom right, and it's working. But every time I want to move it around, I would have to change my pivot. And let's say for some reason I want my pivot to always be at the center because I want to apply like rotation on it, something like this. This wouldn't work. I would have to like give an offset because it's not a line anymore. So you can actually now add an extra offset, like let's say 1010, on top of the literal. So it's going to use the literal plus the offset. So that's a nice thing. If you wanted just to change the offset, let's see, if I was happy with this, but I wanted the jackman to be behind, and I just wanted Z, I can actually just use a single float, and that's going to be used as a Z coordinate. And see, it's been pushed in the back. So we can have, just to recapitulate, we can have a literal, and on top of literal, we can add an offset. The offset, if it's a float, it's going to be just a Z component, and if it's a vector, it's the entire vector. So 5, 0.1 is going to be moving it based on this. But we can also have something even better than that, which is called the pivot override. And the way it works is that it's optional. Right now, there's no pivot override. You can declare it ahead, and then the syntax is the value of the pivot override followed by an arrow and where we want to place it compared to its parent. So let's say I want to align my top left to the bottom right of my parent. That's how you will write it. I want to override my pivot and take, if I have my pivot where as the top left, so I want my top left corner to match the bottom right of my parent. And my pivot remains center, so it just an override the time to place it. And you can see that now my top left of my name is aligned to the bottom right of my character. But if I were to apply an effect on my object, a transformation, it's still using the center pivot, which is quite nice. So let's say that I actually want the bottom of it aligned to the top. So I want the label above my object. That's simple. And same thing, if we want to go back to what we had before, I want the top of my object aligned to the bottom of my parents, and we're back there. And if I want it to be, oh yeah, but I want to add like a little offset in vertical, you add the offset here, and you can see, oh, it's slightly under. And now you can do easily positioning compared to a parent. If there's no parent, this portion, I mean, this is not going to work because there's no parent, so the literal is just going to be 0, and only the offset is going to be used at the end. If we're looking at the creation template, if we're looking for the position, you can see that this line is a bit long. Let's copy it here, and let's break it down. That's the syntax. So we can have a local override. That local override could be a center. We can use a truncate and round if the coordinates are not integers. And it could be left or right or top or bottom, like we used before. Or we could use a vector for the local override. We can also say, oh yeah, I want my coordinate 10, 10 of my child to match the bottom of my parents or whatever. That's fine. So this is the local override. It could be a literal or a vector. And for the parent, it could be a literal as well. So same as before. With an optional offset. The offset, if it's vector, it's a full vector. If it's a float, it's just going to be the z component of it. Or we could be just like an old school position of a vector, like we could do since the beginning of Orx. So the syntax is a bit of a mouthful, but you can see in practice it's very, how can I say that? It should be very straightforward and intuitive. It's just what I want on my object to be to match to be set at the same position on the parent object. So I want my top to be set on the bottom with an offset of 2 pixels vertical. We can see that's okay. So it explains here an optional placement pivot override, literals or vector can be provided at the beginning, followed by an arrow. So it was optional. If a parent is available, the position, literals with optional vector of offset, can be exposed in the parent space, use space. So if I'm going to use, say, use parent space, this here is not going to be in coordinate anymore. It's going to be in the parent space. And that here it means twice the size of my parent in vertically. So I would have the top aligned on the bottom with an offset of twice the size of twice the vertical size of my parents. That's using the parent space. So you see it maps 0 and 1 for each axis. So here means that I don't want to change anything on X. If I were putting this, it means that I want the offset to be the width of my parents plus twice the height of my parents. Because I said use parent space. Otherwise, it's just going to be a regular coordinate in the world coordinate in pixels. So 1 to the right and 2 down. So this is for the relative positioning of objects. Is there any question on this? There's also on Discord that there was a bunch of experimentation. I did like a bunch of examples with green rectangles and red rectangles. I can find the link and post it under the video as well. It was part of the conversation in Discord. I don't know if it's on the wiki, but if it's on wiki, we can also add it. Just examples on how positioning works. And so you can see that it's very versatile and can allow you to position UI elements or like objects relative to each other without having to change your pivot for like it used to be before. Now your pivot can be anything. You can just use the local override to position your objects relatively, and that's very powerful, especially because of the literals. So like aligning things is super simple. Right. Is there any questions on this? I guess not. And I believe that that was it for my list for today. I know that we talked about like vertices and how to render like animated meshes and things like this. This is definitely going to be a very interesting live session, but it's going to be a full live session. So if we look at the playground, so if I were to go to Orx. Sorry, it's tiny on my screen. I don't see it very well. Where is it? It's here. If I were to run Orx, and of course it's on the wrong monitor because I don't have no right. If I were to press the T key, you can see there's like a small animated mesh for the smoke, and that's one way to do it. We just listen to the render event for an object, and we replace, or we can actually modify the actual render, like we get the texture, the position, screen, thing like this. We can modify everything on the runtime, or we can tell Orx, no, I don't want you to render this object at all, and I want you to replace it with whatever call I'm making. And right now I'm just drawing a mesh, and then I'm very simply animating that mesh by moving vertices around. And we can have a live session showing how we could leverage FXs to do this. So right now it's not a hack, but it's a bit of a workaround because you need objects to be able to run FXs. So you would have like a dummy object, and you would query the APIs through those dummy objects. But once FXs are decoupled from objects, you would be able to run them by themselves, and that would be much more handy. But that will be the talk for a full live session, the next one. Another thing I wanted to do is to find a nice way to switch UI. So I mentioned, it's interesting because I had a discussion yesterday before Narwa said that he was switching object at runtime to display different keys depending if the player was on keyboard on a pad. And last night I said maybe we can leverage a local system to do this kind of thing. So like not just having spoken languages, but using those as like, I don't know, sets of icons, something like this. Like for example, PlayStation versus Xbox versus whatever you want, and leverage the local system. But right now it cannot really be done easily. So I'm going to think more about it and see if it's interesting to use this or not. Otherwise, the way I would recommend is just leverage the animation system for this. You can put all your buttons inside the animation set and just switch the animation on the button, and this way you can easily switch the visuals using animation. And because the animation can be set recursively, if all your UI is coming from one single UI object, you can just apply the animation on the UI object, and it will trickle down on all the UI elements. And the animation is only going to be applied to UI elements that have an animation on it and that know this particular animation. So like if you say, I want to switch to the animation, I don't know, like the Xbox animation, only UI element that know the Xbox animation would switch their visual to this Xbox version, and the other any other UI element that do not know about Xbox, let's say because they are regular icon or they are text, they would just ignore the animation. So that's also a nice way to do it. I'm not yet sure which one is the easiest one and which one is less hacky, so I need to think about it before presenting it in a future live session. Is there any questions? No? Well, thank you all for attending, and I wish you a good one, and see you in a few weeks.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.